You have this, like, perfect architectural blueprint in your head.
Oh, yeah.
You know exactly how to fix the system. There is just one massive, glaring problem. You don't manage a single person who actually has to build it.
Right, not one.
So today, we are completely dismantling this myth that you need authority to ship massive technical changes. Welcome to this deep dive.
It's the ultimate paradox, really, of moving up in the engineering world.
Yeah, how so?
Well, you transition from a senior developer, where your impact is tied entirely to, the code you personally type.
Right, your own output.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And you move into a staff or leadership role where your entire job is to change the direction of a ship that you don't actually steer.
It's terrifying, honestly.
It is. I mean, you're essentially standing on the deck with a megaphone, but the engine room doesn't report to you at all.
Exactly. Like, you see the promised land, you've identified a massive architectural flaw. Maybe it's a terrifying single point of failure in your payment processing.
Oh, that's always a fun one.
Right. Or, a convoluted microservice mesh that's adding, like, 2 full seconds of latency to every user request.
It's burning money, basically.
Yeah, and it is just glaring to you. But the team's required to actually execute your fix. They have their own roadmaps.
Yeah.
They have their own product managers screaming for new features. They are already overloaded, understaffed, and completely burned out. So how do you get them to just drop what they are doing and build your vision?
And that question right there is exactly why we are kicking off this engineering leadership series, focusing on a concept that is absolute magic when executed correctly.
Influence without authority.
Yes. Our mission today is to really master how senior engineering leaders drive these cross-team architectural decisions without a mandate.
Which is huge. And we're pulling insights today from a really rich stack of battle-tested case studies, frameworks, and notes from leaders operating at massive scale.
Yeah, the source material on this is just phenomenal.
But I do want to set the stage right away for everyone listening. We are not talking about, like, office politics here.
No, absolutely not.
We aren't talking about manipulation or schmoozing executives at happy hour or using organizational charts as weapons.
Because that doesn't work.
Right. We are looking at the purely practical day-to-day craft of influence.
The real nuts and bolts.
Exactly. We are going to unpack how to build specific artifacts, how to identify and cultivate allies, how to leverage working pilots, and how to accurately diagnose the organizational structure that is, like, secretly causing your technical blockers in the first place.
Yeah, because the moment you try to use the org chart as a weapon, especially when you don't actually possess the authority you're trying to wield, you just end up looking foolish.
Totally.
You alienate the exact engineers and managers you desperately need. But before we get into the tactical toolkit, we really have to define the reality of the battlefield at platform scale.
Because if you don't understand the terrain, your tools are basically useless.
Right. Because no team is just sitting around drinking coffee, waiting for a senior engineer from another department to walk in and hand them a massive new project.
I mean, we can dream, but no.
Not at all. At a platform scale, every single change you propose is in direct, brutal competition with 2 immovable forces.
Okay, what's number 1?
Number 1 is the work that the other team could be doing for someone else.
Right, their existing commitments.
Exactly. And number 2 is the features that the business desperately wants them to ship instead of your architectural fix.
It's like being a city planner who doesn't own any construction crews.
Oh, I like that analogy.
Yeah, like you have this beautiful, mathematically perfect map of where the new subway line should go to relieve traffic.
Right.
But you have to convince 5 different private construction companies who are already booked solid building commercial high-rises to just bring their excavators and dig your tunnels.
That is the exact dynamic. You own the map, but you do not own the crews.
Yeah.
And the dependency chain here is just staggering. Your proposed subway line, or in our world, your proposed architectural change, it might require a massive database migration from Team A.
Which takes months.
Right. Plus an entirely new API gateway from Team B.
Yeah.
And a total UI overhaul from Team C.
It never ends.
And that chain often extends even further into partner organizations. Like, you might need a third-party vendor to update their webhook structure, and you have absolutely zero leverage over them.
But wait, hold on. Let's look at reality for a second here.
Okay, lay it on me.
If this system is genuinely broken, like, let's say this architectural flaw is actively costing the company money, or it's a massive security vulnerability just waiting to be exploited.
A real 5-alarm fire.
Yeah, why is it my job to play diplomat? Why not just go to the VP of engineering or the CEO, lay out the facts, and just let them mandate it down the chain?
Just drop the hammer.
I mean, isn't that what executives are for? To make those calls?
It is the ultimate temptation, right? The nuclear option.
It sounds so much easier.
You just want to push the big red button and have the CEO yell at everyone to do your project. But leaders who rely on that button fail. And they fail incredibly quickly.
Really? Even if they're right about the architecture?
Even if they're perfectly right. The case studies in our source material are definitive on this concept of calibrating force.
Calibrating force, okay.
Yeah. When you escalate to the top to force a mandate down, you completely incinerate trust. You signal to those partner teams that you are basically an adversary.
I guess that makes sense.
You're basically saying, I couldn't convince you on the merits, so I went to your boss to force you.
Okay, I see that. So you win the battle for this specific database migration, but you totally lose the war for any future collaboration.
Exactly.
The next time you need something from Team A, their default answer will be no, and they will hide behind, like, every piece of bureaucracy they can find.
Precisely. They will weaponize compliance and process against you. Leaders who only have one setting, either always pushing aggressively and forcing it down from the top, or always being totally deferential and just walking away the second a team says they are too busy.
Yeah.
They fail in opposite but equally spectacular ways.
Interesting. Because the aggressive leader becomes completely isolated, right? Nobody wants to work with them.
Right. And the deferential leader is loved by everyone, but they never actually get a single thing shipped.
Wow, okay.
So the craft we are talking about today is calibrating that force, knowing exactly when to yield, when to negotiate, and when to push hard across those boundaries without breaking the relationship.
So if brute forcing decisions from the top is totally off the table, we need a reliable, repeatable method to win these cross-team decisions.
We do.
And our stack of engineering leadership materials replaces that top-down mandate with 3 specific pillars: artifacts, allies, and a working pilot.
Yes, that is the modern engineering toolkit. And to deploy those 3 pillars effectively, we use a persuasion framework designed specifically for driving change without a mandate.
And what's that framework?
It's elegantly simple, but incredibly hard to execute. Why, what, how, and ask.
Let's really dig into this because I know I have messed this up personally so many times. The first step is the why. And I can tell you exactly what I used to do. I'd walk into a room, pull up like a 20-page design doc, and say, we need to adopt this new streaming architecture because our current batch processing is objectively slower and technologically inferior.
And how did that go?
Oh, I would just watch everyone in the room completely zone out, blank stares.
And they zoned out because your why was entirely about you and your architectural ideals.
Ouch. But true.
When you start with why, in this framework, it has to be about their shared pain. You cannot walk in preaching the gospel of technological superiority.
Because they don't care.
They don't. To the feature team, technologically superior usually just sounds like a massive migration headache for absolutely no immediate customer value.
That is so true.
Their why isn't about elegant architecture. Their why might be, my team is spending 40% of every sprint manually fixing endpoint routing errors, and we haven't shipped a new feature in a month.
So you have to anchor the entire conversation in a problem that is already keeping them awake at night.
Exactly.
You have to validate their suffering before you can offer a cure.
Yes. Once you establish that shared pain, then you move to the what. And the rule here is brevity.
Keep it short.
Briefly, name the proposal. Do not drown them in UML diagrams or technical specifications yet. Just name the overarching solution to the pain you just agreed exists.
Okay, and then comes the how. This is where I think the real magic happens, because it goes against the instinct of just dumping a project on someone's lap.
The how is all about aggressively reducing their burden.
Aggressively reducing it.
Yes, this is the absolute opposite of an unfunded mandate. An unfunded mandate is, you need to do this, figure it out.
Which everyone hates.
Right. The influence framework sounds like this. I know your team is drowning. I know you do not have the bandwidth for a massive migration. So I am going to write the core integration code myself.
Oh, wow.
All your team needs to do is review the pull requests. You actively remove the friction of adoption. You do the heavy lifting.
Which perfectly sets up the final stage, the ask.
Yes. The ask must be a single, highly specific, incredibly easy to say yes to request.
Give me an example of what not to do first.
Well, the crucial trap to avoid here is seeking committee permission.
Oh, committees.
Committees are where good ideas go to die in a crossfire of hypothetical objections.
That is painfully accurate.
You do not ask a room of 12 people for permission. You find individual champions, and you ask them for a limited trial, not a permanent binding commitment. A trial.
I love how actionable this is. And to really cement how this works in the real world, the sources provide this phenomenal case study that we really need to unpack.
It's a perfect illustration.
It's about implementing telemetry in internal operator tooling.
Let's set the scene for this one. You have an engineering leader who comes to a terrifying realization. There's absolutely no usage telemetry in any of the internal tools their organization builds for the company's operators.
Not at all.
None. They are shipping features totally blindly. They have zero data on what buttons are clicked, what workflows are actually used, or where operators are getting stuck.
Which is crazy when you think about it. I mean, we obsess over customer-facing metrics.
Right, every single click.
Yeah, tracking every mouse movement on a checkout page, but for internal tools, we often just build them and throw them over the wall.
Completely. So this leader goes to management and says the obvious. We need telemetry.
And what does management say?
They give the most predictable response in corporate history. Great idea. Totally agree. But it's not our budget. We have no resources, and it's not on the roadmap for this year.
For, like, 90% of engineers, that is the end of the story right there.
Yeah.
You tried, management said no, you go back to your desk and complain about leadership on Slack.
Exactly. But this leader actually deployed the framework. Instead of escalating or giving up, they started with the why, and they made it about shared pain.
How did they do that?
They created an artifact, a one-pager. And instead of calling it something dry like proposal for telemetry infrastructure integration,
Which nobody would read.
right, they gave it a phenomenal visceral title, The Cost of Building Blind.
The cost of building blind. That immediately triggers a totally different psychological response.
Words absolutely matter.
They really do. It makes the lack of telemetry sound like an active bleeding wound rather than just a theoretical missed opportunity.
And the data they put in that one-pager was devastating.
Yeah.
They didn't just say we should track clicks. They went out and quantified the pain.
What did they find?
They discovered that 30% of the features the engineering teams were currently building were completely underutilized or ignored by the operators.
30%.
And then they translated that 30% into a metric that management literally cannot ignore. Roughly 200 engineering hours per quarter of pure, unadulterated waste.
Let's just pause and think about that. 200 hours.
Yeah.
Every single quarter, you have highly paid, highly stressed engineers spending weeks building complex features that literally no one will ever use.
It's wild.
That completely changes the dynamic of the conversation.
Yeah.
You aren't asking management for a favor anymore. You are walking in with a tourniquet and offering to stop a massive financial bleed.
That was the why and the what, combined into one brilliant artifact.
Okay, so what came next?
Next came the how. Remember, the how is reducing burden.
Right.
The leader didn't form a steering committee to debate vendors. They went out and found individual champions who were already feeling this pain.
Like who?
Well, they found a UX researcher who was deeply frustrated by the complete lack of quantitative data to back up their qualitative user interviews.
Oh, I bet.
And they found a product manager who was just exhausted from having endless evidence-free debates with engineers about what feature to prioritize next.
Well, I know those debates. Without data, a product prioritization meeting is just two people violently arguing about their gut feelings until the person with the highest title wins.
It is exhausting. So the leader gathers these allies and then makes the ultimate burden-reducing offer.
Which was?
I will do the implementation work myself. They completely removed the technical burden from the platform engineers who were already swamped. On top of that, they scrounged around and found $20,000 in unused budget from another initiative to completely offset the infrastructure costs of the telemetry vendor.
They literally brought the funding and the labor to the table. They eliminated every single logical excuse management could have.
Every single one.
Which brings us to the working pilot. What did they actually ask for after doing all this groundwork?
A 2-week developer-only proof of concept. That's it.
That's it.
They didn't ask to instrument the entire production environment. They didn't ask for a multi-year enterprise contract. Just 2 weeks. Only visible to developers. Incredibly low risk.
It is almost impossible for an engineering manager to say no to a 2-week developer-only experiment that someone else is paying for and building.
And the result of that 2-week pilot was explosive. This is the part that really highlights the power of data.
Lay it on us.
The pilot revealed that 40% of the internal users couldn't even find the publish button on the main operator tool.
40%.
Nearly half the users couldn't execute the primary function of the tool because the UI was so confusing, and nobody knew because they were building blind.
That is insane.
The source materials note that this leader took that single terrifying data point, put it in a 5-minute readout, and it instantly killed 6 months of planned alignment meetings.
Because what is there to align on? You can't argue with half our users can't find the big green button.
Exactly.
It completely destroyed the theoretical debates. It flipped the conversation from, should we spend time on telemetry, to how fast can we get this deployed everywhere?
And it ended up spreading to 4 other organizations organically. It is a masterclass in utilizing an artifact, gathering allies, and launching a low-risk working pilot.
However, there is a massive caveat here, and it's something every listener really needs to internalize. The case study includes a very honest self-critique from that leader.
Yeah, this part is crucial.
Despite doing almost everything right, this entire initiative almost died a miserable death.
It did. Why? Because they brought the security team into the process during week 4 instead of week 1.
Oh, the classic gatekeeper mistake. We have all done it. You build the perfect prototype, you're ready to ship, and then you remember, oh, right, I guess InfoSec needs to look at this.
And you drop it on their desk at the 11th hour.
And when you drop a surprise architectural change on a security team or legal or compliance, at the very last minute, their default institutional answer is no.
Or at best, it's take a ticket, we'll review this in 6 weeks.
Right. They are evaluated on risk mitigation, not your future velocity.
Exactly. So the telemetry initiative nearly died in a security review queue.
So how did they recover, and what's the actual lesson for influence here?
The lesson is that you must treat gatekeepers as foundational partners from the very start, not as hurdles to jump over at the end. But the real hack, the craft of influence here, is how the leader adapted. They learned to literally pre-write the security reviews.
Pre-write them. How does an engineer pre-write a security review?
By taking the time to understand exactly what the security team cares about. What are their standard questionnaires? What threat models are they looking for?
So you do the homework.
Yes. Instead of handing security a blank slate and saying, figure out if this is safe, the leader went to them with a document that said, here is the proposed architecture. Here is exactly how data is encrypted in transit and at rest. Here is how we are handling PII. Here are the ports we need open and why.
By doing the translation work for them, by speaking their language and doing the heavy lifting, the leader was able to cut the security team's actual review time by 80%.
That is brilliant. It circles right back to the how of reducing burden. If you make it incredibly easy for a gatekeeper to say yes, if you literally do their paperwork for them, they usually will say yes because you respect their time.
Now, in that telemetry example, the leader had hard objective numbers to lean on. They could point to 200 wasted hours. But let's look at a different, arguably more difficult scenario. What if you are dealing with a system where the process is so profoundly convoluted and so fragmented across like 6 different silos that nobody can even see the full picture of how broken it is?
Where there are no clean numbers to pull because the mess is totally invisible.
Exactly. That is the reality for so many legacy systems. Everyone knows it's painful, but nobody knows exactly why it's painful because they only see their tiny sliver of the workflow.
And when the coupling between teams is invisible, your very first job as a leader is to make that invisible mess visible to everyone.
Yes.
We have another incredible deep dive case study to illustrate this. It's about a promotional campaign flow for a major console gaming platform.
Let's lay out the sheer dysfunction of this setup for you. At this gaming platform, the workflow for creating a new promotional campaign, like, say, featuring a new game on the dashboard,
Right.
it touched multiple different, totally siloed engineering and operations teams. None of these teams reported to the leader who was trying to fix the process.
Zero authority.
Zero. And the process itself was an absolute nightmare of manual labor. People were hand-building digital bundles. They were manually grouping massive graphical assets. They were uploading terabytes of files by hand through clunky internal portals.
And the business impact was severe. It wasn't just annoying for the engineers, right? It was actively harming the business model.
Yes, so.
The manual overhead required to launch a campaign was so high and took so many labor hours that it was pricing small game titles entirely out of promotional coverage.
Wow.
If you were an independent indie developer, the platform literally couldn't afford the manual labor required to promote your game. The ecosystem was suffering.
So how does an engineering leader fix a cross-functional nightmare when they have zero authority over the teams involved? Their first move is key.
What did they do?
They didn't isolate themselves in an ivory tower, write a 50-page architecture manifesto, and demand everyone adopt it.
Thank goodness.
They co-designed the solution with a highly respected senior engineer from one of the core teams. And again, they framed the entire proposal around the specific, acute pain of each individual team.
But the real stroke of genius here is the specific artifact they created to drive this change.
What was it?
They didn't just write a standard design doc. They ran exhaustive cross-program focus groups, getting representatives from every silo in a room. And out of those sessions, they built what the case study calls a hop-on, hop-off chart.
A hop-on, hop-off chart. I love that terminology. It instantly brings to mind a subway map or a bus route.
That is exactly the intent. They built a massive visual chart that mapped the entire agonizing manual process end to end.
So everyone could see it.
Yes. For the first time ever, every single team involved could look at this map and see exactly where their specific work plugged into the flow where they hopped on.
And more importantly, they could see exactly who they handed their messy output to where they hopped off.
Exactly. They made the invisible toxic coupling entirely visible.
That is so powerful because it creates a shared reality. It's one thing to know that your specific daily task is annoying.
Sure.
It's a completely different psychological experience to look at a map and realize that your annoying daily task is actually the massive bottleneck that is crushing 3 other teams downstream.
It shifts the mindset from my annoying job to our broken system.
But there is a detail in this case study about trust that really stands out to me. The leader didn't just facilitate this map, hand it over to the teams, and say, great, now go build the automation.
No, they didn't.
The leader personally stepped in and led the first phase of the new architecture into production.
Yes. Why do you think that was a necessary step for influencing without authority?
Well, because asking a burned-out, cynical team to trust an entirely unshipped, theoretical new architecture is asking too much.
Right.
Engineers have been burned by silver bullet architectures before. Some architect comes in, promises the moon, leaves the feature team to actually build it, and it turns out the architecture is full of holes and impossible to implement.
Precisely. You have to make adoption the path of least resistance. By personally leading that first phase into production, the leader absorbed all the initial terrifying risk.
They proved it worked.
They proved that the new automated flow actually worked in reality, not just on a whiteboard. They didn't arrive with a finished, inflexible mandate. They refined the system through actual iterations in the real world alongside the teams. They had skin in the game.
And the result speaks for itself. Campaign setup time dropped by up to 82%.
That's massive.
And that hop-on, hop-off charting practice wasn't just a one-off. It was adopted across the entire program because it was so incredibly effective at clarifying messy organizational boundaries.
But this raises a really important practical question. You can have the best artifacts in the world. You can have the most compelling hop-on, hop-off charts. You can run a flawless pilot. But eventually, reality's going to hit.
Always does.
A partner team that you're relying on is going to suddenly pull their bandwidth mid-project. In fact, that exact scenario happened in the gaming campaign case we just talked about.
Oh, really?
Yeah. Halfway through the automation project, a critical partner team got reorged or reprioritized and just vanished.
Classic. So how do you keep a massive architectural change moving when you have absolutely no authority to force that partner team to stay on your project?
This is where we transition from persuasion into the actual mechanics of removing blockers. When the going gets tough, how do you navigate?
The materials outline a very specific 3-step blocker strategy, right?
Yep.
Absorb, escalate, and root around.
It is a phenomenal framework for maintaining momentum. Let's take them one by one. The very first step, whenever you hit a dependency blocker, is to attempt to absorb it.
What does that look like?
If the dependency blocking you is relatively small, maybe you are waiting on a partner team to write an API spec, or make a minor configuration change to a load balancer, or spin up a test environment for.
Right.
You do not sit around waiting.
Don't just complain.
Right. Do not open a Jira ticket and complain for 3 weeks. Just do it yourself.
It's the concept of sweeping the floors. It's faster to just write the API spec yourself and hand it to them for review, and it builds immense goodwill.
Exactly.
You become known as the leader who actively removes friction rather than the person who just generates tickets and red tape.
You absorb the pain, but obviously you cannot absorb everything. Sometimes the blocker is massive. You can't just write a massive database migration for another team on a weekend.
Right. That brings us to step 2, escalate.
Yes.
Okay, stop right there. I have to push back on this because I feel like we are contradicting ourselves. Wait, isn't escalation just a polite corporate word for tattling?
I get why you'd say that.
We spent the first 10 minutes of this deep dive establishing that escalating to the CEO or VP to force a mandate destroys trust. Now the framework is explicitly telling us to escalate. How is that not just running to mom and dad to fix the problem?
It sounds totally contradictory until you reframe what the word escalation actually means in a healthy, mature engineering culture.
Okay, lay it on me.
You are completely right that escalating to complain or to force a mandate is tattling, and it is incredibly toxic. But you must reframe this critically. In a mature organization, you escalate as information, not as failure.
Escalate as information. Okay, what does that actually sound like in a meeting with a VP?
Let's role play it. Toxic escalation sounds like this. Hey VP, Team B is lazy. They are ignoring my JIRA tickets. They are blocking my project. You need to yell at them to do their jobs.
Yeah, that burns bridges forever.
Exactly. Informational escalation sounds like this. Hey VP, here is exactly what I have tried to resolve this dependency. Here's what I currently need from Team B to hit our milestone. However, Team B's manager has informed me that they are strictly prioritized on Project X for the business. This means my Project Y is officially stalled.
Okay, so you're just laying out the facts.
Leadership, I am not asking you to punish Team B. I am asking you to clarify for both of us which project is the actual priority for the business right now so we can allocate resources correctly.
Oh, wow. That is fundamentally different. You aren't attacking the other team. You are attacking the ambiguity.
Yes.
You are asking leadership to do their job, which is deciding priorities.
Yeah.
You are managing the system, not attacking the personality.
Exactly. You are forcing the business to make a hard choice, rather than forcing two engineering managers to fight it out in the mud.
Makes total sense.
But let's say escalation doesn't work. Leadership won't make a decision, or the partner team just genuinely has zero headcount. That brings us to step 3. Root around.
If you hit a totally impenetrable wall, you have to redesign the architectural or project phase boundary.
Yes.
Give me an example of what routing around looks like in practice.
Look back at the gaming campaign case. When that critical partner team pulled their bandwidth mid-sprint, the leader didn't throw a tantrum or try to politically destroy them.
They didn't escalate and whine.
No. The leader looked at the architecture and said, okay, we can't do this the way we planned. They temporarily absorbed the immediate, critical dependency into their own team's sprint to keep the lights on. And then they went back to the drawing board and entirely restructured the next phase of the project around what that partner team could realistically commit to in the future. They changed the design to fit the reality of the organization.
They adapted the architecture to fit the organizational reality, rather than trying to force the organization to fit a rigid architecture.
Yes.
And by doing that, the case study specifically notes that the relationship with that partner team was actually stronger afterward.
Yeah.
Because the partner team felt respected and understood, not bullied and thrown under the bus.
Which naturally brings us to a huge topic, diagnosing conflict. Because when you hit these massive blockers, tempers inevitably flare.
Oh, yeah, they do.
Let's look at a very common scenario that the sources dissect. Imagine two engineering managers are in an open, heated conflict during a system design discussion. Voices are raised, people are defensive, it's getting ugly. What is the root cause of that conflict?
Well, the lazy answer, the one we all default to, is to look at that meeting and say, oh, Dave and Sarah just have incompatible personalities. They don't like each other. Dave is too stubborn, Sarah's too aggressive.
Right. It's easy to blame personality.
But my analogy for this situation is totally different. To me, it's like a car manufacturer installing 2 steering wheels in one car, putting 2 drivers in the front seat, and then acting shocked and angry when they get into a fist fight over which way to turn at an intersection.
That is a brilliant analogy, and it perfectly encapsulates the finding here. It is almost never a personality issue. It is a structural issue.
Always structure.
The organizational theory is definitive on this exact dynamic. Ambiguous ownership plus high stakes equals predictable, unavoidable conflict.
Ambiguous ownership plus high stakes. Let's break that down.
Look at Dave and Sarah in that meeting. Both of these engineering managers have incredibly high stakes. They have clear accountability for their own team's delivery. Yeah. If this new architecture fails, or if it brings down production, their performance reviews suffer. They might lose their bonuses. The stakes are real.
The pressure is on.
But there is absolutely no clear owner for the shared technical decision between them. They both have a steering wheel, they both will suffer the consequences if the car crashes, but the organizational structure never defined who is actually supposed to steer.
So of course they are fighting. They are terrified of failing because of someone else's decision.
Exactly.
So how do you fix that structure as a leader trying to influence them? How do you stop the endless fighting?
First, you take the conflict out of the public arena. You do not try to solve a structural dispute in a 15-person design review meeting.
That's just a recipe for embarrassment.
It is. You talk to each manager separately in one-on-ones.
Hmm.
You try to find the underlying interest beneath their stubborn position.
What does that mean?
What are they actually afraid of? Is Sarah fighting the database choice because she's stubborn? Or because her team is on call on weekends, and she knows this database technology has a history of failing at 2 a.m.?
You uncover the fear, and then what?
Then, you have to establish a cultural norm for the project. The strongest idea wins, not the loudest voice. But most importantly, to fix the two steering wheels problem, you must name a tiebreaker. You name a single DRI, a directly responsible individual.
Yes, the DRI concept is huge. It completely removes the ambiguity.
It does, but a DRI alone isn't enough. You also have to explicitly separate the input phase of a decision from the decision phase.
That's where so many teams fail, right?
Yes. You have to clearly communicate to Dave and Sarah, we're currently in the input phase, everyone's voice will be heard, we will debate the merits.
Okay.
But on Friday at noon, we transition to the decision phase. At that point, the DRI will make the final call based on the input, and we will all commit to it.
If you fix the structure like that, you stop relitigating the exact same friction on every single future decision. Okay, so resolving these structural blockers, figuring out who the DRI is, who owns what, requires a really clear shared understanding of how platform teams and feature teams are supposed to interact in the first place.
Right.
Because it's not just a generic binary, we build the tools, you use the tools dynamic. There is a massive amount of nuance in organizational design.
A huge amount of nuance. A mature engineering organization doesn't just let teams interact however they want. They operate with very explicit engagement modes.
Let's break those down.
The frameworks outline 4 deliberate choices for how a platform team interacts with a stream-aligned feature team, plus a vital 5th mode that is crucial for leadership. Let's briefly define the first 4 so we have the vocabulary.
Okay.
Number 1 is support. This is the most basic. The platform team is simply helping a feature team use the existing platform, answering questions, providing documentation.
Right. Number 2 is review. This is where the platform team acts as an architectural check. A feature team wants to build something new, and the platform team reviews the design to ensure it isn't going to accidentally DDoS the internal network or break a core dependency.
Perfect. Number 3 is platform. This is the classic model. The platform team owns the paved road. They provide the highly reliable, self-serve infrastructure, like a Kubernetes cluster or a logging pipeline that the feature teams build upon independently.
Exactly. And number 4 is architecture owner. This is when the platform team completely owns the overarching design and constraints of a system, even if they aren't writing every line of feature code. They set the boundaries.
Those are the standard 4 modes. But the 5th mode is where senior engineering leadership really proves its worth. The frameworks call it temporary adoption or the senior move.
I really want to focus heavily on this 5th mode because it addresses a massive, painful reality that almost every senior engineer has faced.
Let's hear it.
What happens when a feature team completely fails to hold its reliability targets? Let's say a feature team builds a new microservice. It goes into production, and it is a disaster.
It happens.
It's constantly crashing, it's causing cascading failures, taking down other parts of the system, and the feature team, maybe they are inexperienced or just totally overwhelmed. They just cannot seem to stabilize it. What do you do?
It is a nightmare scenario, and it causes immense resentment between teams. And this is exactly where the temporary adoption pattern comes in.
How does it work?
Instead of the platform team just yelling at the feature team or writing angry emails to their VP or just letting the system burn down, the platform organization steps in and takes operational responsibility for that failing service.
They adopt it.
They adopt it, they take the pager, they dive into the code, level up the underlying pieces, stabilize the architecture, and this is the most critical part, they hand it back.
Okay, I hear this, and every alarm bell in my head is ringing.
I know.
Here is my fear, and I know a lot of listeners are thinking the exact same thing. How do you prevent this from becoming a permanent dumping ground for bad code?
It's a very valid fear.
Because human behavior is driven by incentives. If I'm a product manager on a feature team, and I know that if I push my developers to write terrible, unstable code just to hit a deadline, The highly skilled platform team will eventually swoop in, take it off my hands, and fix it for free. Where is my incentive to ever prioritize technical debt? Aren't we just subsidizing and rewarding bad engineering?
That is the exact existential risk of this pattern. If you do it wrong, you turn your elite platform team into a glorified janitorial service for the rest of the company.
Exactly.
That is precisely why the materials refer to this as the senior move. It requires immense organizational discipline. You prevent it from becoming a dumping ground by defining the exit criterion explicitly in advance.
In advance, okay.
Before the platform team ever touches the code, before they accept the pager, everyone, the platform team, the feature team, and both sets of leadership must explicitly agree on what leveled up actually means.
So you need an ironclad contract.
Yes, a strict technical contract. You do not just say, we will fix it. You define the metrics.
Give me some examples of those metrics.
Does leveled up mean 99.9% uptime over a trailing 30-day window? Does it mean achieving 85% test coverage? Does it mean entirely migrating off the deprecated database?
You define the exact measurable metrics.
And you get leadership to agree that the moment those metrics are hit, the service is cleanly handed back to the feature team, and the feature team resumes carrying the pager.
Everyone must agree on this definition of done, so the platform team can exit cleanly and take on new strategic work, rather than just becoming a permanent babysitter.
Exactly.
I love the bridge loan analogy for this. It's like a financial bridge loan. The platform team is lending you their expertise and taking on your technical debt temporarily to save you from bankruptcy. But before they sign the check, you have to sign a legally binding agreement on exactly how and when you are going to pay them back and take ownership again.
That is a perfect way to visualize it. Now, if a feature team is consistently failing and requiring this temporary adoption over and over again for everything they build, it might indicate something deeper.
What do you mean?
It might not actually be a code problem or a skills problem. It might be an org chart problem.
And now we are arriving at the absolute core of system architecture, the inescapable gravity of engineering organizations, Conway's Law.
Conway's Law. You cannot fight it, you can only accommodate it.
Let's define it really clearly for anyone listening who hasn't encountered it, because it is foundational to everything we are discussing.
Definitely.
Bill Conway stated in 1968 that organizations which design systems are constrained to produce designs which are copies of the communication structures of those organizations.
Yes.
The classic plain English example is, if you have 4 distinct engineering teams working on a compiler, you will inevitably end up with a 4-pass compiler.
Every time.
The software will always mirror the org chart. Clean build and release boundaries in your technical system absolutely require clean boundaries in your organizational structure.
And it cuts both ways with brutal efficiency. When your team boundaries do not map cleanly to your technology boundaries, you get predictable, agonizing failure modes.
Like what?
You get one completely overloaded team that suddenly becomes the bottleneck for the entire company because every technical path routes through their disorganized code.
Oh, man.
You get incredibly slow, error-prone handoffs at the seams between teams. And worst of all, you get zero accountability when cross-line systems break because everyone points fingers at the other side of the invisible boundary. It's not our API, it's your payload.
We have all lived through that nightmare, and the source materials are very, very clear about this. The answer is not to just reflexively reorganize the engineering department every 6 months.
Please don't do that.
I think everyone listening has survived a company that reorgs constantly trying to find the magic structure. It is exhausting.
Constant reorgs destroy productivity and completely obliterate psychological safety. The mandate from successful leaders is diagnose before you reorg.
Diagnose before you reorg.
Do not just shuffle reporting lines on a hunch or because a new VP read a blog post. You have to do the hard work of mapping the actual value streams.
What does mapping a value stream actually entail?
It means tracing the entire literal path of a piece of code. From the exact moment a developer hits commit, to the automated build phase, to the testing phase, to the release phase, all the way to how it operates and is monitored in production.
Okay, so you map the whole journey.
You map that whole stream visually, and you look for the friction. Where does the code sit in a queue for 3 days waiting for a manual review? Where do deployments fail 50% of the time?
You find exactly where the wait time and the pain are concentrating. The notes mention using the team topologies framework to ask a very specific diagnostic question during this process. You have to look at your teams and ask, which capabilities should be platform? meaning they are self-served, automated, a paved road for others to use without asking permission, and which capabilities should be stream-aligned.
Right, streamline meaning they are built end-to-end by a single autonomous team delivering value directly to the customer.
Yes, correctly classifying your teams into platform versus stream-aligned solves a huge amount of friction. But we also have to respect organizational history.
Oh, this is a big one.
This is a trap many new architects fall into. Sometimes an organizational boundary looks completely logically wrong on paper, but it is actually exactly right in practice.
Give me an example of that. Because usually my instinct is that if it looks wrong on the architecture diagram, it is wrong in reality.
Not always. The materials provide a fascinating counterexample. Imagine an organization responsible for the delivery pipeline, the CI/CD infrastructure team.
Okay, the pipeline team.
On paper, their job is just moving code. But practically, they might actually be the absolute best owner for a few mission-critical, centralized back-end services that every other team depends on, like an identity management service or a core routing layer.
Why? Wouldn't a centralized identity service logically belong to a core back-end product team, not the pipeline plumbing team?
Logically, on a clean whiteboard diagram, yes. But practically, think about the lived experience of that pipeline team.
They see everything.
They already carry the operational discipline of keeping the lights on 24/7. They deeply understand extreme reliability because if the CI/CD pipeline goes down, the entire engineering organization grinds to a halt.
That makes total sense.
They know how to handle massive scale and zero downtime deployments. Therefore, they might be the safest possible hands for a mission-critical identity service, even if placing it there violates a perfectly clean theoretical architectural diagram.
So the lesson here is always probe the cognitive load of the teams before you alter the org chart.
Exactly. If moving a service to the theoretically correct team will crush that team with operational cognitive load they aren't prepared for, leave the service where it is safe.
Theory must bow to operational reality.
Okay, let's bring this all together. To pull off everything we've discussed today, from mapping complex value streams, to running cross-team focus groups, to negotiating those temporary adoptions of failing services, people need to fundamentally trust you.
They have to.
You absolutely cannot influence without a deep foundation of credibility and sustainable execution. Nobody listens to an architect who can't deliver. Which brings us to our final section, the hidden engine.
Trust, visibility, and three-layer delivery. These are the daily, often unclamorous practices that build up the political capital you eventually spend when you need to influence a massive decision.
Let's start with a conversational framework that I found incredibly validating when I read it. Name the ambiguity.
Oh, this is a lifesaver.
We have all been in this situation. You're in a high-stakes engineering meeting, maybe with a few staff engineers and a director. Someone throws out an acronym or references a legacy system architecture concept that you do not know.
Panic sets in.
The intense, overwhelming pressure in that moment is to just silently nod your head, pretend you understand so you don't look stupid in front of the senior technical talent.
It is a universal human instinct to preserve status. But the expert advice here is that silently nodding along when you are confused is actually incredibly dangerous for your long-term influence.
Why is it dangerous?
Because guessing wrong destroys your credibility downstream. If you nod, agree to a technical dependency, and then fail to deliver 3 weeks later because you didn't actually understand what you agreed to in that meeting, your reputation is torched.
But a flat, blunt, I don't know, can also be risky, right? If you constantly say, I have no idea what that is, it can make you look like a competence risk to senior leadership.
Exactly, which is why the phrasing of how you admit ignorance matters so much. Instead of a flat conversation-stopping, I don't know, you reframe it to keep the momentum going and show intellectual curiosity.
What's the script for that?
You say, I'm not intimately familiar with the internals of System X. Can we dig into that for a minute? Or, what am I missing here regarding the data model?
This sounds way better.
And then, crucially, you immediately ask for concrete next steps. Can we schedule a 30-minute pairing session so you can walk me through the code base? Or could you drop a link to the reference documentation in the chat?
It shows deep engagement and a desire to learn rather than just exposing ignorance.
It's the difference between hitting a dead end and asking for a map. It projects confidence.
Okay, the next major framework for building trust is three-layer delivery. This is essentially a blueprint for how to build trust by running a genuinely healthy, predictable team.
Right, because again, no one is going to listen to your grand architectural vision if your own team is constantly missing deadlines, pushing bugs, and burning out.
Your own house must be in order before you tell the neighbors how to build theirs.
The three-layer delivery model breaks team health down perfectly. Layer 1 is strategic, which is the outside-in view. This is about direction and business value.
What are we actually asking here?
Are you hitting your OKRs?
Mm-hmm.
Are you actively tracking KPIs and customer feedback? Are you running monthly business reviews to keep your team honest about whether the code they are writing actually matters to the company?
That's the compass. You have to know you're sailing in the right direction. Then you have layer 2, which is execution, the inside-out view. This is the engine room.
Right. How are your sprint metrics? And more importantly, what is the actual developer experience? Do you have rigorous CI/CD practices?
Because when your continuous integration pipeline takes 45 minutes to run, you aren't just losing 45 minutes of time. You are destroying a developer's flow state.
Exactly. They switch to Slack, they lose context, they get frustrated.
Yeah.
Layer 2 is about making sure pull request reviews are thorough but fast,
Yeah.
and ensuring you have strict quality gates, stopping bad code from hitting production and causing weekend fire drills.
And layer 3 is team health, the human layer. Weekly, qualitative one-on-ones, blameless retrospectives where people actually feel safe discussing failures, clear, actionable career paths.
You cannot mathematically sustain layer 1 and 2 if the humans in layer 3 are miserable and turning over every 6 months.
There is a great mini case study of this in action. There was an infrastructure team that was absolutely drowning in ad hoc requests from other departments. They were constantly missing their sprint commitments, and as a result, they were losing trust fast across the organization.
People view them as a bottleneck.
So the leader intervened aggressively across all 3 layers. For layer 1, the strategic layer, they added a strict intake process to ruthlessly prioritize requests based on business value. For layer 2, execution, they added automated CI gates to stop production issues from happening in the first place, reducing the firefighting.
And for a combined layer 2 and layer 3 approach, they did something counterintuitive. They instituted a 20% interrupt budget.
They explicitly planned for the chaos.
I love the interrupt budget. Instead of pretending that unexpected bugs won't happen, you dedicate 20% of your sprint capacity solely to handling unplanned work.
The results of fixing these 3 layers were undeniable. Support tickets for this team dropped 40% in just 2 quarters.
40%.
Sprint predictability, meaning they actually delivered what they promised, jumped from 60% to 85%. The team felt in control again.
And because the leader fixed the execution, they generated immense credibility. Now, when that leader speaks up in a cross-department architecture meeting, people listen because they know that leader runs a tight ship and can deliver.
Which perfectly transitions to the final piece of the influence engine: visibility and relationships. Driving monumental architecture shifts like the telemetry tools or the gaming campaign flow we discussed requires deliberate visibility.
Deliberate visibility. I know some engineers who might hear that phrase and cringe.
Yeah, they think, oh, that's just self-promotion. That's ego. My code should speak for itself.
That is the most common and most fatal trap for brilliant engineers. It is not about ego. Doing the work keeps you employed, but making the impact of the work visible is what actually changes the organization.
Right.
If you build a brilliant, highly scalable system and nobody outside your team knows how it works or why it matters to the business, your influence is zero.
So what does deliberate visibility look like in practice?
Deliberate visibility means presenting at architecture forums. It means writing public, easily searchable decision logs. It means hosting cross-functional lunch and learns. You make the craft and the impact visible so that stakeholders trust your judgment implicitly the next time you propose something radical.
And this brings us to the ultimate long game. I want to ask you about how we invest in relationships over the long term, because building influence isn't an overnight hack. You don't just read a book on influence and suddenly command the room on Monday morning.
It is a massive, patient investment. Look at the final case study in our materials. It was a massive integration between an engineering team in India and a team in the US.
Okay.
They were clashing constantly over time zones and communication styles. The leader tasked with smoothing this integration didn't just walk in with a slide deck mandating structural changes. They ran 50 individual one-on-one meetings across those two teams.
50 individual meetings. Think about the sheer time commitment that takes. That is weeks of calendar time just dedicated to listening.
And the absolute key to this story is that there was zero immediate ask in those meetings. No transactional mode. If the leader didn't say, I need you to work differently, they just built trust.
They listened to the pain points.
They sought to understand the friction of the time zone difference. And because of that massive non-transactional investment, when the leader eventually proposed shifting to an async-first working model with heavy documentation, it was adopted without resistance. The soil was prepared.
That is the essence of influence. It's probabilistic, not transactional. You do the work, you build the trust, you listen to their pain, and the payoff comes months later when you need it most.
Exactly.
Well, this has been an incredibly dense, actionable journey through the realities of technical leadership. Let's briefly recap what we've unpacked today.
Sounds good.
We learned that influence isn't about having the right title. You can't just mandate change from the top without burning trust. It's about calibrating your force. It's utilizing artifacts like the cost of building blind one-pager to quantify pain and the hop-on, hop-off chart to make invisible messes visible.
That's building allies and launching low-risk, undeniable working pilots.
We talked about untangling structural conflict by defining the directly responsible individual, understanding the nuances of platform engagement modes, especially the strict discipline of temporary adoption with an exit contract, and diagnosing your org design through the lens of Conway's law before you ever attempt a reorg.
It is a comprehensive, battle-tested toolkit for anyone trying to steer the massive ship from the middle of the fleet.
Exactly. So I want to leave you, the listener, with a final thought to mull over as you go back to your own teams this week. Think about the biggest technical roadblock you are facing right now.
That one massive project or architectural change that feels completely impossible to move.
Right. Is it possible that you have been treating a purely structural boundary problem as a personality problem? What if the very first step to fixing your massive system architecture isn't writing another 20-page technical design document, but simply scheduling 3 one-on-ones with the managers of the partner teams?
With absolutely zero transactional requests.
Yes, 0 requests. Just to finally understand their operational pain. Remember, you might just be the city planner, and you might not own the construction crews, but if you can show them exactly how the new road makes their daily drive better, they will bring their tools and build it with you.
Well said.
Thank you so much for joining us on this deep dive. Take these tools, map your value streams, find your champions, and start building your influence today.